can't take this anymore." Brett's voice cut through the tense silence, his face contorted with rage. "Why the hell should I listen to you?" My heart sank as I braced myself for the inevitable confrontation. What was supposed to be a pleasant family dinner had quickly spiraled into a nightmare. Tessa, my stepdaughter, shot me an apologetic glance before turning to her fiancé. "Brett, please, this is my family." "Family?" He scoffed, glaring at me with utter contempt. "She's nothing but an outsider who wormed her way into our lives." The insult stung like a slap to the face. Anger and hurt swirled within me, but I forced myself to remain calm. "I've been part of this family for over 15 years. Show some respect." "Respect?" Brett let out a derisive laugh. "You don't deserve an ounce of it." Aaron, my husband, finally spoke up. "That's enough, Brett. You've gone too far." But Brett wasn't done. He turned his venomous gaze toward Harper, my younger stepdaughter. "And you're just her little lapdog, aren't you?" blindly following her lead. Harper's eyes blazed with fury. "How dare you talk to us like that?" "I'll talk however I want," Brett sneered. "This is my family now, and I won't have some stepmother and her pet trying to control us." That was the final straw. I slammed my fist on the table, causing the dishes to rattle. "Get out of my house, you ungrateful bastard!" Chaos erupted as Tessa tried to calm Brett, while Aaron attempted to reason with me. Harper stormed out of the room, her footsteps echoing in the hallway. I glared at Brett, every fiber of my being seething with rage. "You've just made the biggest mistake of your life." As the argument raged on, I knew there was no going back. The insults, the disrespect, it was unforgivable. In that moment, a part of me died, replaced by a burning desire for revenge. Little did Brett know, he had awoken a force he could never comprehend. A mother's wrath. I should have seen the cracks forming years ago, but I was blinded by love and the hope of creating a complete family. It all started when I met Aaron at the office holiday party. He was a divorced father of 2 girls, Tessa and Harper, struggling to balance work and parenthood. I was instantly drawn to his warmth and the way his eyes lit up when he talked about his daughters. 6 months later, we were married, and I found myself thrust into the role of a stepmother. Harper, the youngest, embraced me with open arms. But Tessa, already a rebellious teenager, kept her distance. "She's not my real mom," she'd mutter under her breath whenever I tried to connect with her. Aaron brushed it off as a phase, but I could see the resentment growing in Tessa's eyes with each passing year. "Give her time," he'd say with a reassuring smile. "She'll come around." But she never did. The battles became more frequent, over curfews, boyfriends, and eventually her choice of college. Tessa made it clear that I had no say in her life. "Stay out of it, Yolanda," she'd snap, her voice dripping with venom. "You're not my mother." Each word felt like a dagger to my heart. I tried everything to build a bond with her, but she shut me out at every turn. One night, after a particularly heated argument, I broke down in front of Aaron. "She hates me," I sobbed, burying my face in my hands. "No matter what I do, she'll never accept me." Aaron pulled me close, his embrace offering little comfort. "I'm sorry, sweetheart. I'll talk to her. We'll sort this out." But we never did. The years passed, and the chasm between Tessa and me only grew wider. Harper remained my lifeline, the one person in the family who truly understood me. "Don't give up on her," Harper would say, her eyes filled with sadness. "Deep down, she knows you love her." But Tessa's hatred had taken root, festering like an open wound. And when she brought Brett into our lives, everything changed. The first time I met him, alarm bells went off in my head. There was an arrogance about him, a sense of entitlement that set my teeth on edge. "So you're the stepmother," he'd said, his voice laced with disdain. I forced a smile, determined to make a good impression. "It's nice to meet you, Brett. I've heard so much about you." He simply sneered and turned away, leaving me standing there like a fool. From that moment on, Brett became the catalyst that tore our family apart. He fueled Tessa's resentment, whispering poisonous words into her ear, turning her against me and Harper. And now, after that fateful dinner, the bonds that once held us together had been shattered beyond repair. As I lay awake that night, anger burned within me like a raging fire. Brett had crossed a line, and I knew there would be no turning back. It was time to make him pay. Tessa's announcement of her engagement should have been a joyous occasion, a chance for our family to mend the fractures that had formed over the years. But deep down, I knew better. I want you all to be a part of this, Tessa had said, her eyes shining with hope as she clutched Brett's hand. Harper beamed at her sister, genuinely happy for her. But I couldn't shake the sense of dread that settled in the pit of my stomach. Of course, we'll be there, Aaron promised, wrapping an arm around my shoulders. This is a celebration for all of us. I forced a smile, determined to make the best of the situation. Maybe this was the olive branch Tessa and I needed to finally put the past behind us. That naive optimism was shattered a month later at the engagement party. The evening started off pleasantly enough, with family and friends gathering to toast the happy couple. But as the drinks flowed, Brett's true colors began to show. "To Tessa and me," he announced, raising his glass with a smug grin. "The future Mr. and Mrs. Keaton, starting a new chapter in our lives without any unnecessary baggage." His eyes locked onto mine, the implication clear. Harper must have sensed the tension because she quickly intervened. "Aw, come on, Brett. We're all family here." "Family?" He let out a derisive laugh. "Don't kid yourself, Harper. Once Tessa and I are married, we'll be cutting ties with all the dead weight." A hush fell over the room as everyone processed his words. I could feel the blood draining from my face. Aaron stepped forward, his voice strained. "Brett, I think you've had too much to drink. Let's take a break." But Brett wasn't done. He turned his venomous gaze toward me, his words slurring with each insult. "You're nothing but a parasite, leeching off my soon-to-be wife's family. Well, let me make one thing clear. You and your little lapdog over there have no place in our lives." That was it, the final straw. Before I could stop myself, I hurled my glass at him, the contents splattering across his smug face. Pandemonium erupted as guests scattered, screaming and shouting. Aaron tried to restrain me, but I was beyond reason. "You miserable piece of trash!" I screamed, struggling against my husband's grip. "How dare you speak to us like that?" Harper rushed to my side, her eyes blazing with fury. "Let's get out of here," she hissed, grabbing my arm. As we stormed out, I caught a glimpse of Tessa's devastated expression. But in that moment, I didn't care. Brett had crossed a line, and there was no going back. We spent the night at my sister Lynette's, Harper doing her best to console me as I raged about Brett's insults. "He's a monster," I spat, pacing back and forth, "and Tessa is too blind to see it." Lynette watched us with a pensive expression, her gaze filled with concern. "You know what you have to do, right?" I froze, meeting her eyes. A silent understanding passed between us. It was time to fight fire with fire, and Brett was about to get burned. In the days following the disastrous engagement party, a dark cloud of anger and resentment hung over me. Brett's vicious words echoed in my mind, fueling the flames of revenge that burned within. Aaron tried to reason with me, but his pleas fell on deaf ears. "Sweetheart, think about what you're doing. This isn't the way to handle things." I whirled on him, my eyes blazing. "And what would you have me do? Sit back and let that bastard disrespect us like that?" He recoiled at the venom in my voice, but I was past the point of caring. Brett had awoken a fury in me that could not be extinguished. Harper remained my steadfast ally, her unwavering support a lifeline in the storm. "Don't listen to Dad," she said, squeezing my hand. "We'll make Brett pay for what he did." Her words were like balm to my wounded soul. At least someone understood the depths of my pain. It was then that Lynette dropped a bombshell. She had connections that could expose the skeletons in Brett's closet. "The guy's been cooking the books at his company for years," she revealed, her voice low and conspiratorial. "Embezzlement, fraud, you name it." A wicked grin spread across my face. "Perfect. It's time we brought that scumbag down a few pegs." Harper's eyes widened, but she didn't protest. Instead, a matching grin tugged at her lips. Over the next few weeks, Lynette fed us information about Brett's shady business dealings. The more we uncovered, the more my hatred for him grew. Aaron, oblivious to our machinations, continued his efforts to reconcile. "Tessa's devastated," he'd say, his brow furrowed with worry. "She needs her family right now." I scoffed at his words. "She made her choice when she decided to marry that piece of trash. Don't expect me to feel sorry for her." The rift between us deepened, with Aaron growing increasingly frustrated with my stubbornness. But I didn't care. My sole focus was on making Brett pay. As the wedding date loomed closer, the tension in our household became palpable. Tessa's phone calls grew more desperate. He's pleading with us to attend the ceremony and support her. "Please, Mom," she'd beg, her voice thick with tears. "I need you there." The use of that word, Mom, sent a pang through my heart, but the wound Brett had inflicted was too raw, the betrayal too deep. "I'm sorry, Tessa," I'd reply, my voice devoid of emotion. "But I can't be there for you this time." Harper remained steadfastly by my side, her loyalty unwavering. "Don't let her guilt you," she'd say, wrapping an arm around my shoulders. "We're in this together." And together we would strike, unleashing a storm of retribution that would leave Brett's world in ruins. As the wedding day drew near, the calm before the storm settled over us. But I could feel the electricity crackling in the air, the promise of vengeance waiting to be unleashed. Brett had no idea what was coming for him. The days ticked by with agonizing slowness as Tessa's wedding drew near. Each time the phone rang, I steeled myself for another round of pleading and guilt-tripping. "Mom, please," Tessa would beg, her voice thick with desperation. "I need you there. It wouldn't be the same without you." I could hear the tears in her words, but my resolve remained unshaken. "I'm sorry, Tessa, but you made your choice when you decided to marry that monster." Harper would squeeze my hand, a silent show of support as I delivered those harsh words. She understood the depths of my pain, the utter betrayal I felt at Brett's hands. Aaron, ever the peacemaker, tried in vain to reason with me. "Sweetheart, this is tearing our family apart. Can't you see how much this is hurting Tessa?" I rounded on him, my eyes blazing with fury. "And what about how much Brett has hurt us? Don't you dare try to make me feel guilty for standing up to that piece of trash." He recoiled at the venom in my voice, utterly helpless in the face of my wrath. Lynette, bless her soul, remained my steadfast ally. "Don't let them get to you," she'd say, her voice low and conspiratorial. "We've got the goods on Brett, and it's time to make him pay." With her help, we compiled a dossier of evidence, financial records, emails, and witness testimonies that painted a damning picture of Brett's illegal activities. Embezzlement, fraud, insider trading, the list went on and on. As the wedding day drew closer, a sense of grim satisfaction settled over me. The storm was gathering, and Brett had no idea what was about to hit him. The night before the ceremony, I sat alone in the darkness, clutching the damning evidence in my hands. Memories of Brett's insults, his utter disrespect, flooded my mind, stoking the flames of vengeance that burned within. This wasn't just about teaching him a lesson. It was about protecting Harper, ensuring that she never had to endure the pain and rejection I had suffered at his hands. A soft knock at the door pulled me from my thoughts. Harper slipped into the room, her eyes shining with determination. "It's time," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I nodded, rising to my feet. Together we marched into the night, the weight of our mission heavy on our shoulders. As the first rays of dawn peeked over the horizon, the authorities were already in motion, armed with the evidence we had provided. Brett's world was about to come crashing down around him. The morning of Tessa's wedding dawned bright and clear, a cruel mockery of the storm that was about to be unleashed. Harper and I arrived at the venue early, slipping into the back of the ceremony hall like two silent wraiths. We kept our distance, watching from the shadows as the guests began to arrive. Aaron tried to approach us, his face etched with worry and confusion. "Delia, Harper, what's going on? Why are you hiding back here?" I met his gaze, my expression cold and unyielding. "Don't worry about us, Aaron. Just enjoy the show." Before he could protest further, a commotion erupted near the entrance. Raised voices and the sound of scuffling reached our ears, cutting through the excited chatter of the guests. Tessa appeared, her beautiful white gown billowing around her as she rushed toward the disturbance. "What's happening? Brett, where are you?" That's when we saw him. Brett, disheveled and wild-eyed, being led away in handcuffs by two stern-faced officers. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the crowd as they took in the shocking scene. Tessa's face drained of color, her hands flying to her mouth in horror. "Brett, what's going on? Why are you being arrested?" He tried to struggle free, his voice a desperate snarl. "It's all lies. Those bitches set me up." His eyes found mine in the crowd, and for a moment our gazes locked. A twisted smile curved my lips as I reveled in the sweet taste of revenge. The officers hauled him away, his curses and threats echoing through the hall. Tessa collapsed to her knees, great heaving sobs racking her body as the reality of the situation sank in. Harper gripped my arm, her eyes wide with a mixture of shock and satisfaction. "You did it," she breathed. "You really did it." I nodded, unable to tear my gaze away from the unraveling disaster before us. Guests were fleeing in droves, their faces etched with disgust and disbelief. Tessa's bridesmaids hovered around her, their expressions a mixture of pity and embarrassment. Aaron pushed his way through the chaos, his face pale and drawn. "Delia, what have you done?" I met his gaze, my expression unapologetic. I did what needed to be done. Brett got exactly what he deserved. He shook his head, his eyes filled with a mix of anger and sadness. "This isn't how we handle things. You've gone too far." But I didn't care about his disapproval. In that moment, all that mattered was the sweet taste of victory, the knowledge that Brett's reign of terror was over. As the dust settled and the venue emptied, Tessa remained a crumpled figure on the floor, her dreams and hopes for the future shattered around her. Harper squeezed my hand, a silent understanding passing between us. We had won this battle, but the war was far from over. Brett's downfall was just the beginning. In the days following the disastrous wedding, the news of Brett's arrest and the subsequent fallout became the subject of intense media scrutiny. Overnight, Tessa and her disgraced fiance became social pariahs, their reputations in tatters. "Can you believe this?" Harper would exclaim, brandishing the latest tabloid article with a mix of glee and disgust. "They're calling him the embezzling ex-fiancé." I couldn't help but revel in Brett's public humiliation, a sense of grim satisfaction washing over me each time his name was dragged through the mud. Tessa, for her part, remained holed up in her apartment, refusing to answer calls or face the world. Aaron tried desperately to reach out to her, but his efforts were met with stony silence. "She's devastated," he confided in me, his eyes filled with a mix of pity and frustration. "I don't know how to help her through this." I scoffed at his words, my contempt for Tessa's wallowing evident. She made her bed when she chose that scumbag over her own family. Don't expect me to feel sorry for her. As the weeks dragged on, the consequences of Brett's actions rippled outward, affecting those closest to him. Business partners severed ties, friends distanced themselves, and his once promising career lay in ruins. It was during this time that I finally confronted him face to face. Harper and I had made a habit of staking out his apartment, reveling in the schadenfreude of watching him slink home each night, a shell of his former arrogant self. One evening as he emerged from the building, his shoulders hunched and his eyes downcast, I couldn't resist the opportunity. Well, if it isn't the disgraced ex-fiancé himself," I called out, my voice dripping with disdain. He whipped around, his eyes widening in recognition and fury. "You," he spat, his hands curling into fists. "You did this to me, you crazy bitch." Harper moved to intervene, but I held up a hand silencing her. This was my moment, and I intended to savor it. "No, Brett," I said, my voice laced with venom. "You did this to yourself. All I did was expose the truth about the kind of lying, cheating scumbag you really are." His face contorted with rage, and for a moment I thought he might strike me. But Harper's presence seemed to give him pause, and he settled for hurling insults instead. "You're going to pay for this," he snarled. "Mark my words, you and your little brat are going to regret the day you crossed me." I threw back my head and laughed, the sound harsh and mocking. "Regret? The only thing I regret is not doing this sooner. You got exactly what you deserved, you miserable excuse for a human being." With that, I turned on my heel, leaving him seething in impotent fury. Harper fell into step beside me, her eyes shining with admiration. "That was amazing," she breathed. "You really showed him." I nodded, a sense of triumph swelling within me. Brett's threats rang hollow. He was a broken man, his power and influence stripped away. It was then that Tessa finally emerged from her self-imposed exile, her face haggard and her eyes rimmed with dark circles. She sought me out, her expression a mixture of sorrow and shame. "Mom," she began, her voice trembling. I don't know what to say. I was so blind, so incredibly stupid." I regarded her coolly, my anger still simmering beneath the surface. "You're right about that. You chose that piece of trash over your own family." Tears welled in her eyes, and she dropped to her knees before me, a broken woman. "I know, and I'm so sorry. Please, You have to believe me, I never meant for things to get so out of hand. Harper hovered nearby, her expression softening as she watched her sister's anguish. I remained unmoved, my heart hardened by years of rejection and pain. Sorry doesn't undo the damage, Tessa. You broke this family, and I don't know if we can ever truly put it back together. Her shoulders shook with sobs, and for a moment I felt a twinge of pity. But the memory of Brett's insults, his utter disrespect, quashed any impulse toward forgiveness. I'll do anything, Tessa pleaded, her voice choked with tears. Anything to make things right again. I gazed down at her, my expression impassive. We'll see about that. But mark my words, Tessa, the path to redemption won't be an easy one. As she wept at my feet, I knew that this was just the beginning of a long and arduous journey. But for the first time in years, I felt a glimmer of hope that our family might one day be whole again. In the aftermath of Brett's downfall, the road to healing was a long and arduous one. Tessa remained steadfast in her remorse, her pleas for forgiveness a constant refrain. I know I don't deserve it, she would say, her eyes brimming with tears. But please, give me a chance to make things right. Aaron, ever the peacemaker, urged me to extend an olive branch. She's our daughter, Delia. We have to try and move past this for the sake of our family. I would regard him coolly, my anger still simmering beneath the surface. She made her choice when she chose that scumbag over us. Why should I forgive her now? Harper, caught in the middle, tried her best to mediate. Mom, she's really trying here. Can't you see how much she's hurting? I would soften, if only a little, that at Harper's words. Our bond, forged in the fires of betrayal, remained unbreakable. Slowly, grudgingly, I began to entertain the idea of reconciliation. Tessa's constant presence, her unwavering efforts to make amends, gradually wore away at the walls I had erected around my heart. It was during one of our strained family dinners that the breakthrough finally came. I know I can never undo the pain I've caused, Tessa said, her voice trembling with emotion. But I swear to you, from the bottom of my heart, that I will spend the rest of my life making it up to you. Her words hung in the air, heavy with sincerity, and for the first time I felt the icy grip of anger begin to thaw. Harper reached across the table, taking my hand in hers. Give her a chance, Mom, please. I met Tessa's gaze, searching for any trace of deception, any hint of the selfishness that had once consumed her. But all I saw was raw, unguarded remorse. With a heavy sigh, I nodded. All right, but understand this, it's going to take time. A lot of time. Tessa's face crumpled with relief, tears streaming down her cheeks. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. From that day on, the healing process began in earnest. It was a slow, often painful journey, fraught with setbacks and emotional landmines, but Tessa remained steadfast, her commitment to making amends never wavering. Aaron, his eyes shining with pride, watched as our family began to knit itself back together. I knew you could do it, he murmured, pulling me into a warm embrace. Harper, my constant ally, beamed with joy as the rifts between us gradually closed. I told you she was worth another chance, she said, her voice filled with affection for her sister. As for me, I navigated the path to forgiveness with cautious optimism. The wounds ran deep, the scars of betrayal still tender. But in Tessa's unwavering remorse, I saw a glimmer of hope, a chance to reclaim the family I had once cherished. It would be a long road, paved with difficult conversations and hard-won trust. But for the first time in years, I allowed myself to believe that we could emerge from this crucible stronger, more resilient, and more tightly bound than ever before. The path to redemption had been set, and though the journey would be arduous, I knew in my heart that we would walk it together as a family. I never saw it coming. One moment I was standing in my living room, confronting Trent about his suspicious behavior and unexplained absences. The next, I found myself trapped in the dark, damp confines of our basement, a place I hadn't set foot in for years. What is the meaning of this, Trent? I demanded, my voice trembling with a mix of fear and outrage. Why are you doing this? Trent's normally warm, brown eyes had turned cold and calculating. I'm doing what I have to, Avery, he said, his tone laced with a chilling finality. You were never meant to see the truth. I watched in horror as he slammed the metal door behind him, the sound echoing through the cavernous space like a death knell. Panic gripped me, my heart pounding against my chest as I frantically searched for a way out. The basement was a maze of shadows, the air thick with the musty smell of neglect. I stumbled through the darkness, my hands tracing the rough, uneven walls, desperately seeking an escape. But the more I explored, the more it became clear that Trent had trapped me in this dank, forgotten corner of our home. "Trent, please!" I shouted, my voice cracking with desperation. "Let me out of here!" There was no response, only the eerie silence that seemed to taunt me, mocking my helplessness. I sank to the floor, my knees trembling as the reality of my situation sank in. How could this be happening? Trent, the man I had loved and trusted for nearly a decade, had turned against me in the most unimaginable way. Flashes of our life together played in my mind. The way he had swept me off my feet with his charming smile and his grand promises of a life filled with adventure and success. I had been so blinded by his facade, so eager to believe in the fairy tale he had spun. Now, that fairy tale had shattered, leaving me trapped in a waking nightmare. As the minutes ticked by, my mind raced, searching for a way to escape. I knew I couldn't give in to despair, not when I had so much to live for. Somewhere out there, my friends and family were wondering where I was, and I couldn't let them down. Summoning every ounce of courage I could muster, I began to explore the basement more thoroughly, searching for anything that could aid my escape. The space was cluttered with old boxes and forgotten relics, but as I sifted through the debris, a glimmer of hope emerged. Tucked away in the corner, partially obscured by a tattered tarp, was a small metal toolbox. I yanked it free, my fingers trembling as I popped it open. Inside, I found a set of old, rusted tools: a hammer, a screwdriver, and a pair of pliers. A wave of determination washed over me. I may have been trapped, but I wasn't helpless. With these tools, I could find a way out of this nightmare and reclaim my life. Gripping the screwdriver tightly, I set to work. My mind focused on the task at hand. I would not be a victim, not in my own home. Trent would pay for what he had done, and I would make sure of it. As I tinkered with the tools, a sense of purpose coursed through me, pushing back the fear that had threatened to consume me. I would find a way out of this basement, no matter what it took. The old screwdriver felt heavy in my hand, a makeshift weapon against the darkness that surrounded me. I pried open the panels of the door, searching for any weaknesses, any sign of an escape route. Time seemed to stand still as I worked, the ticking of an unseen clock the only measure of the seconds that passed. With each failed attempt, my frustration grew, but I refused to give in to despair. Then, just as I was about to give up, my fingers brushed against a small, hidden compartment in the door's frame. My heart raced as I pulled it open, revealing a set of keys, Trent's keys. "Trent, you fool," I muttered, a bitter smile spreading across my lips. "Did you really think you could keep me trapped here forever?" I wasted no time in fitting the key into the lock, turning it with a soft click. The door swung open, and I stepped out into the dimly lit hallway, my senses on high alert. The house was eerily quiet, save for the muffled sounds of Trent moving about upstairs. I crept forward, my footsteps light and cautious, until I reached the living room. That's when I saw it. A stack of papers, neatly arranged on the coffee table. They were financial statements, bank records, and legal documents, all bearing Trent's name. As I sifted through them, a sinking feeling settled in the pit of my stomach. "Oh, Trent," I whispered, "what have you done?" The papers revealed a web of financial fraud, hidden offshore accounts, and shady business deals. It was all there, the damning evidence of Trent's betrayal, his carefully constructed facade crumbling before my eyes. I quickly gathered the documents, stuffing them into a messenger bag I found nearby. With this evidence, I would be able to expose Trent's crimes and bring him to justice. Just then, I heard the distinct sound of footsteps on the stairs. My heart raced as I ducked behind the couch, holding my breath and praying that Trent wouldn't find me. "Avery?" Trent's voice called out, the hint of panic in his tone betraying his composure. "Avery, where are you?" I watched as he strode into the living room, his eyes darting around the space. He approached the coffee table, his brow furrowing as he noticed the missing documents. "No, no," he muttered, his hands trembling. "This can't be happening." I seized the moment, stepping out from my hiding place and confronting him head-on. "Looking for these, Trent?" I said, holding up the incriminating papers. Trent's face paled, the color draining from his features. Avery, how did I escape? I interrupted, my voice laced with disdain. It seems you underestimated me, dear husband. Now, it's time to face the consequences of your actions. Trent's expression morphed from shock to panic as he realized the gravity of his predicament. He opened his mouth to speak, but I held up my hand, silencing him. Save it, Trent. I've seen everything, and I'm not going to let you get away with this. With that, I turned and headed for the door, determined to seek the help of the authorities and ensure that Trent's reign of deception and fraud came to an end. With the incriminating documents in hand, I knew I had to get out of the house as quickly as possible. Trent's panicked expression had told me all I needed to know. He would stop at nothing to keep his secrets hidden. I hurried toward the front door, my heart pounding in my chest, but just as I reached for the handle, I heard Trent's voice behind me, dripping with a chilling mixture of desperation and rage. Avery, stop! You can't leave. You have no idea what you're dealing with. I turned to face him, holding the bag of documents close to my body. I know exactly what I'm dealing with, Trent. You're a fraud, a criminal, and I'm going to make sure the world knows it. His eyes narrowed, and for a moment I saw a glimpse of the man I had once loved, the charming, charismatic figure who had swept me off my feet. But that man was gone, replaced by a twisted, desperate individual willing to do anything to preserve his carefully constructed facade. Please, Avery, you have to understand, he pleaded, taking a step closer. If you leave, you'll be putting yourself in grave danger. I'm only trying to protect you. I scoffed, unwilling to be swayed by his empty words. Protect me? You locked me in the basement, Trent. You betrayed my trust and everything we built together. I won't let you manipulate me anymore. I turned the doorknob, but before I could pull the door open, Trent lunged forward, his hands grasping at the bag. We struggled, each of us refusing to let go, until a sudden movement from the corner of my eye caught my attention. Lena! I cried, recognizing my neighbor standing just outside the open door. Lena's eyes widened as she took in the scene unfolding before her. Without hesitation, she rushed forward, her hands pushing Trent away from me. Get away from her, you monster! Lena shouted, her voice laced with fury. Trent stumbled back, a look of pure panic on his face. Lena, you don't understand. I understand perfectly, Lena interrupted, stepping in front of me protectively. I've seen the way you've been behaving, Trent, and I won't let you hurt Avery anymore. Trent's gaze darted between Lena and me, his desperation palpable. You have to believe me. I'm trying to keep her safe. If she leaves, she'll be in grave danger. Lena scoffed, her expression unwavering. We both know that's a lie. Now, get out of our way, or I'll make sure the police hear everything. Trent's shoulders slumped in defeat, and without another word, he stepped aside, allowing Lena and me to pass. As we hurried out the door, I couldn't help but glance back at him, a tinge of sorrow mixed with the overwhelming sense of relief. Once we were safely outside, Lena turned to me, her eyes filled with concern. Avery, are you all right? What's going on? I took a deep breath, my hands still trembling from the ordeal. Lena, I need your help. Trent is not who he seems. He's been involved in criminal activities, and I have the evidence to prove it. Lena's expression hardened, and she nodded resolutely. Then we need to get this to the authorities, immediately. You're not alone in this, Avery. I'm with you, every step of the way. As we rushed toward Lena's car, I knew that with her by my side, I finally had a chance to bring Trent's deception to an end. The road ahead would be difficult, but I was more determined than ever to reclaim my life and see that justice was served. As Lena and I sped away from the house, a sense of relief and determination washed over me. I had escaped Trent's clutches, and now, with the incriminating documents in hand, I had a chance to expose his crimes and reclaim my life. Where are we going? I asked, gripping the bag tightly. To my place, Lena replied, her eyes fixed on the road ahead. We need to gather some people we can trust and figure out our next move. I nodded, knowing that I couldn't take on Trent alone. This was a battle that required a unified front, and I was grateful to have Lena by my side. When we arrived at Lena's cozy townhouse, she ushered me inside, her expression serious. Avery, I know this is a lot to process, but we need to act quickly. Trent is dangerous, and he's not going to give up without a fight. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves. I know, Lena. That's why I need your help. I can't do this alone." Lena placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. "You're not alone. I've already reached out to a couple of people who can help us." Just then, the doorbell rang and Lena hurried to answer it. I watched as she ushered in a familiar face, Marcus, my childhood friend. "Avery," Marcus exclaimed, pulling me into a tight hug. "Lena told me what happened. Are you all right?" "I'm okay, Marcus," I replied, squeezing his hand gratefully. "But Trent? He's not who I thought he was." Marcus's expression darkened. "I always knew there was something off about that guy. What did he do?" I quickly explained the situation, outlining Trent's web of deceit and the damning evidence I had uncovered. Marcus's face tightened with a mix of shock and anger. "That son of a bitch," he growled. "Don't worry, Avery. We're going to make sure he pays for what he's done." Just then, the doorbell rang again, and Lena ushered in another guest, Eliza, a lawyer friend of hers. "Avery, I'm so sorry to hear about what you've been through," Eliza said, her voice laced with concern. "Lena told me everything, and I'm here to help in any way I can." I felt a surge of gratitude, knowing that I had the support of these powerful allies. Together, we would take down Trent and ensure that he faced the consequences of his actions. "Thank you all for being here," I said, my voice steady. "I know Trent is a formidable opponent, but with your help, I'm confident we can expose his crimes and bring him to justice." The group gathered around Lena's dining room table, poring over the documents I had retrieved. Eliza took charge, her legal expertise guiding our discussion. "This evidence is damning, Avery," she said, her brow furrowed in concentration. "We can use it to build a strong case against Trent, but we'll need to be strategic in how we approach this." Marcus chimed in, his eyes gleaming with determination. "Whatever it takes, we'll do it. Trent's not going to get away with this, not on our watch." As I listened to my friend's unwavering support, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. I was no longer alone in this fight. Together, we would bring Trent down and reclaim the life he had stolen from me. Seated around Lena's dining room table, the group pored over the documents I had obtained, each of us determined to uncover the full extent of Trent's deceit. Eliza, the savvy lawyer, took the lead, her sharp eyes scanning the financial records and legal paperwork. "This is worse than I thought," she murmured, her brow furrowing in concentration. "Trent has been involved in a complex web of fraud, money laundering, and other illicit activities. We'll need to tread carefully if we're going to bring him down." Marcus, my loyal childhood friend, clenched his fist, his knuckles turning white. "That bastard," he growled. "After everything he's put Avery through, he deserves to rot in prison." Lena placed a calming hand on Marcus's arm. "Easy, Marcus. We can't afford to be reckless. Trent is dangerous, and we need to make sure we have an airtight case against him." I nodded, my own anger simmering just beneath the surface. Lena's right. We need to be strategic, and that means gathering as much evidence as possible. Trent won't go down without a fight. Eliza cleared her throat, drawing our attention. "Well, I have an idea. It's risky, but if we pull it off, we might be able to catch Trent red-handed and expose his crimes to the world." We leaned in, hanging on her every word as she laid out her plan. It was a bold, daring scheme that would require all of our resources and unwavering determination. But as Eliza spoke, I felt a surge of hope. This was our chance to take back control and make Trent pay for his betrayal. "Are you all in?" Eliza asked, her gaze sweeping across the table. Without hesitation, we all nodded, our resolve steeled by the prospect of justice. In the days that followed, we set our plan in motion, each of us playing a crucial role. Lena and Marcus used their connections to gather additional information about Trent's activities, while Eliza worked tirelessly to ensure our legal strategy was airtight. Meanwhile, I found myself delving into the world of digital espionage, hacking into Trent's accounts and monitoring his movements. It was a risky endeavor, but the thought of Trent's reckoning fueled my determination. As we inched closer to our goal, the tension in the air was palpable. Trent seemed oblivious to our machinations, continuing to go about his day-to-day life with his usual air of confidence and charm. "He has no idea what's coming," Eliza said, a triumphant gleam in her eye. I couldn't help but feel a twinge of pity for the man I had once loved. But that sentiment was quickly overshadowed by the thirst for justice. "Let's make sure he pays for what he's done," I said, my voice resolute. With the final pieces of our plan in place, we set the stage for Trent's downfall. The day of the big event arrived, and as I stood alongside my allies, I felt a sense of power and determination that I had never experienced before. When Trent arrived, his usual swagger replaced by a hint of unease, I knew the moment of reckoning had arrived. It was time to confront him, to expose his crimes, and to ensure that he faced the consequences of his actions. As I stepped forward, the incriminating documents in hand, I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the confrontation that was about to unfold. As Trent approached, his gaze darting around the crowded event space, I felt a surge of adrenaline coursing through my veins. This was the moment we had been waiting for, the chance to bring him down and expose his deceit once and for all. I stepped forward, the incriminating documents clutched in my hand. "Trent," I called out, my voice ringing out across the room. "We need to talk." Trent's eyes widened as he recognized me, and a flicker of panic crossed his features. He tried to maintain his composure, but I could see the cracks in his carefully constructed facade. "Avery," he said, his tone laced with a forced calmness, "what are you doing here?" "I'm here to expose your crimes, Trent," I replied, my words dripping with venom. "Your web of fraud and deception ends today." A hush fell over the crowd as they sensed the tension in the air. Trent's gaze darted around the room, his eyes pleading for someone to intervene, but no one moved. "I don't know what you're talking about, Avery," he said, his voice wavering. "This is all just a misunderstanding." I stepped closer, holding the documents up for all to see. "Oh, it's no misunderstanding, Trent. These documents prove that you've been embezzling funds, manipulating financial records, and even laundering money. Your entire empire is built on a foundation of lies." Trent's face paled, and I could see the beads of sweat forming on his brow. "Avery, please, you have to understand. I was only trying to protect you. Everything I've done for us." I scoffed, the disgust evident in my expression. "Protect me? You locked me in a basement, Trent. You betrayed my trust and everything we had. And now, you're trying to cover up your crimes by playing the victim?" The crowd erupted in murmurs, and I could see the realization dawning on their faces. Trent's carefully crafted image was crumbling before our eyes. "This is all a lie," Trent shouted, his desperation palpable. "Avery is the one who's been unfaithful, not me. She's the one who's been stealing from me." I shook my head, unwilling to let him deflect the blame. "Nice try, Trent, but your lies won't work this time. The authorities have already been informed, and they're on their way to arrest you." Trent's eyes widened in horror, and he took a step back, his gaze darting around the room in search of an escape. But there was nowhere for him to run. Not this time. "No, this can't be happening," he cried, his voice laced with a mix of fear and fury. "Avery, you have to believe me. I'm the victim here." I watched as the realization dawned on him, the walls closing in as his carefully constructed world crumbled around him. There was no more room for his deceptions, no more chances to escape the consequences of his actions. "It's over, Trent," I said, my voice firm and unyielding. "Your reign of terror is at an end." Just then, the sound of sirens echoed through the air, signaling the arrival of the authorities. Trent's face contorted with a desperate panic, and he made one final, futile attempt to flee. But it was too late. The police officers swiftly apprehended him, their faces grim as they read him his rights. I stood there, my heart racing as I watched Trent being led away, his desperate pleas fading into the distance. The confrontation had been intense, but it was over. Trent's downfall had been set in motion, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of relief wash over me. As I watched the police officers lead Trent away, a wave of emotions washed over me. Relief, yes, but also a lingering sense of disbelief and sorrow. Despite everything he had done, a part of me still couldn't reconcile the man I had married with the criminal he had become. The crowd around me erupted in a flurry of activity, people whispering and murmuring, their expressions a mix of shock and awe. I stood there, clutching the incriminating documents, feeling a strange sense of both triumph and emptiness. Lena, Marcus, and Eliza quickly gathered around me, their faces etched with concern. "Avery, are you okay?" Lena asked, placing a gentle hand on my arm. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my racing thoughts. "I don't know," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. "I never thought it would end like this." Marcus squeezed my shoulder, his expression hardening. He got what he deserved, Avery. That bastard's gonna pay for what he's done to you. Eliza nodded in agreement, her eyes filled with a fierce determination. We'll make sure he faces the full consequences of his actions. The evidence we gathered is solid, and the authorities are already building their case against him. I nodded, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. Then let's make sure justice is served. I want Trent to lose everything. His business, his reputation, everything he's worked so hard to build. The days that followed were a whirlwind of activity. Trent's arrest made headlines, and as the details of his crimes began to unfold, the public's outrage only intensified. Suddenly, those he had once manipulated and charmed turned against him, eager to see him brought to justice. His business empire crumbled as clients and partners severed ties, unwilling to be associated with his tarnished name. Investors pulled out, and the once thriving company found itself on the brink of collapse. Trent, once the picture of success and affluence, was reduced to a tattered shadow of his former self. I watched from the sidelines as he desperately tried to defend himself, but his lies and excuses only served to dig him deeper into a hole of his own making. At one point during a heated court hearing, Trent turned to me, his eyes wild and pleading. "Avery, you have to help me," he begged, his voice trembling. "I can't go to prison. You have to make them see reason." I stared at him, my expression unwavering. "You had your chance, Trent. You chose to betray me, to betray everything we had. Now you have to face the consequences of your actions." Trent's face contorted with a mix of rage and despair. "You're going to ruin me," he shouted, his outburst drawing the attention of the court. The judge, unimpressed by Trent's outburst, shook his head in disgust. "Mr. Clark, your actions have already ruined you. The evidence against you is overwhelming, and I have no choice but to remand you into custody until your trial." Trent's shoulders slumped in defeat, and as the bailiffs escorted him away, I couldn't help but feel a pang of pity. Despite everything he had done, a part of me still mourned the man I had once loved, the one who had so skillfully hidden his true nature behind a facade of charm and success. But that man was gone, replaced by a desperate, broken individual who was now facing the full weight of his crimes. As I watched him disappear, I knew that this was the end of an era, the end of Trent's reign of deception, and the beginning of a new chapter in my life. As the dust settled around Trent's dramatic downfall, I found myself standing at a crossroads in my life. The man I had once loved and trusted was now facing the consequences of his actions, and I was left to pick up the pieces of my own shattered existence. In the weeks that followed, I dove headfirst into rebuilding my career and reclaiming my independence. With the support of Lena, Marcus, and Eliza, I was able to secure a new job as a marketing consultant, using my skills and experience to forge a fresh start. "You know, Avery, I'm really proud of you," Lena said one evening, as we sipped our wine at her cozy townhouse. "After everything you've been through, you're picking yourself up and moving forward." I smiled, feeling a sense of pride and relief wash over me. It hasn't been easy, but I'm determined to make the most of this new chapter. Trent may have taken so much from me, but he can't take away my strength and resilience. Lena reached across the table, giving my hand a gentle squeeze. "And you have us, Avery. We're here for you, no matter what." I nodded, knowing that I was truly blessed to have such loyal and unwavering friends by my side. "I don't know what I'd do without you all. You've been my lifeline through this whole ordeal." Marcus, who had joined us for the evening, leaned back in his chair, a mischievous grin on his face. "Well, what are friends for? We're just glad we could help take that son of a bitch down. He's getting what he deserves. And you, Avery, you're the one who came out on top." I couldn't help but chuckle at Marcus's blunt assessment. That may be true, but it hasn't exactly been easy. Trent was a big part of my life for so long, and letting go of that has been challenging, to say the least. Eliza, who had been quietly listening, leaned forward, her expression thoughtful. "I can only imagine how difficult this must be for you, Avery, but you've shown incredible strength and resilience. You're not defined by Trent's actions. You're so much more than that." I nodded, feeling a surge of gratitude for my friends and their unwavering support. "You're right, Eliza. I'm ready to move on and focus on the future. Trent may have taken away my security and sense of trust, but he can't take away my drive and determination to rebuild my life. As the evening wore on, we shared laughter, exchanged stories, and made plans for the future. I found myself feeling lighter, more hopeful than I had in months. In the days that followed, I threw myself into my work, pouring my energy into developing innovative marketing strategies for my clients. The more I immersed myself in my career, the more I felt a sense of purpose and fulfillment returning to my life. And as I navigated this new chapter, I couldn't help but reflect on the journey that had led me here. Trent's betrayal had been a devastating blow, but with the unwavering support of my friends and my own indomitable spirit, I had emerged stronger and more resilient than ever before. I may have lost my fairy tale, but in its place I had gained something far more valuable, the knowledge that I was capable of overcoming even the darkest of obstacles. And as I looked towards the future, I felt a renewed sense of excitement and possibility, ready to embrace all that lay ahead.